car accident is another quite impactful event in someone's life, but might be traumatic event for one person, but not for another. Every country, every cultural group, every indigenous group have a different understanding of what trauma is, of what healing is, of what resilience is. So there's no one let's say fixed definitions, but common understanding, common richness of knowledge that exists in our world about both resilience and trauma. Yeah, does that, Belinda, is this the direction you wanted to go with this conversation?
Yes, absolutely. Just maybe to differentiate a little bit about trauma work and therapy and trauma informed practice. And yeah.
Yeah, oof, that's a big question. Um, so maybe before should we do a little shake? So
Mhm.
bringing our body back to the present moment. Maybe you're in your head. So you're welcome to do what feels comfortable or accessible to you. Maybe it's a shake of your arms, legs, and your head. But maybe for you, it's a rocking back and forth on your chair. And maybe taking time as well to scan, to orient. Yeah, some of you is yawning. Yeah, absolutely. So bringing this body back to the present moment. And some of you have the need to close your eyes, to return back to the body. Yeah, absolutely. So orient, breathe, and ground. So a big part of a trauma-informed work for me, especially when we think about trauma-informed principles or concepts, is present moment experience. And if we think of body work, present moment experiences in the body. That can be a very frightening place for many. Present moment is also not always a very accessible place because you're either, someone talked about stuck. I can't remember, there was a word called stuck. Yeah. So being stuck in a physiological emotional response of an event from the past, so being stuck in the past, or being stuck in the future when we think about anxiety, rumination, worries. Um, that's also the inability to be in the here and now, or the difficulty or the challenge. So for me, a big part of trauma informed work is to reconnect to the present moment in the body. And that can mean different things for different people. When we think about another important guiding principle for me, or guiding thread, because I'd like to get rid of principles and concepts and rules, but let's say a thread, a leading thread for me is choice making. So you notice that I offer choice, I offer invitation to, so giving power back to. So often a traumatic life event is something where you had no choice. It's something that happened too fast, maybe over a long period of time, and especially if we think of complex trauma in context of developmental trauma, complex trauma, something that happens in the context of relationship, where you had no choice. There was a bridge in trust, a bridge in safety, a sense of powerlessness, of helplessness. So giving power back to, giving agency, giving efficacy, giving the other some moments of power, agency in their own bodies. And that's um, it's been extremely relieving for me as well. in therapy work, to know that I am holding a container for someone without having prescriptive goals of where I'm going, but have a container where the present moment exists and where my clients or my groups are really taking back power. So honoring back the agency in their bodies. And that's been a very important thread for me. So avoiding this power dynamics, giving back power to being prescriptive. There's not one fixed solution. There's not one tailor-made solution for everyone. So what might work for Brinda might not work for Priti. Maybe for Priti, noticing breath with her arms feels accessible and safe. Maybe for Brinda, moving her arms up and down feels very frightening. So maybe for Brinda, noticing her breath through her nose or through her chest or through her stomach, maybe that feels more accessible for Brinda to reconnect with her body in the present moment. So these are small examples. So these are more in terms of trauma-informed guidelines, principle, or weaving threads, let's say, that guide me. And another thing for me would be understanding the impact. So Sushmita talked about impact. Understanding what trauma and its impact on the body for individuals. So what it does to their bodies, what it does to their communities, what it might do to the relationships that they have with others. So being informed in that way is very important for me, and it's very important for the work. And once you understand that, perhaps you're also more in the capacity to hold a non-judgmental, curious space for people to reconnect, for people to co-regulate, for people to rebuild, or put all these different fragmented pieces of themselves back together a little bit, because the impact can be very big on a physiological level, on a psychological level. It can be very big on a social level, on a behavioral level. And the impact of this, the sense of being of a whole, that wholeness, the impact is maybe fragmented in trauma. So how do you find a way to reconnect or put all these pieces together? So these are, for me, trauma-informed threads. When we talk about trauma therapy or treatment, and this is maybe very different for the expressive art field, but if we think of clinical work, we have top-down approaches, EMDR, we have CBT, we have NET, narrative exposure therapy, so all these clinical treatments that exist for trauma, but most commonly known PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. But let's look at those are what we call maybe more clinical treatments, more protocolized treatments. And then we have our fields of work. I don't know if some of you, are there people here? So let me see. Let's strike a pose if you're an expressive arts therapist. Strike a pose, so then I know. Oh, and then I strike pose. Yeah. And if I don't see you, maybe you can, a little bit write about the work that you do. Okay. Yeah. So expressive arts therapy. That's why I don't like to talk about it in forms of treatment. Student, great, but we love having students in these groups as well, because that's also part of the trauma-informed work that we do. If our communities and if our writers, our students, our mothers, our fathers, our uncles, and our workplaces are trauma-informed, how how loving maybe our world would be, how much more loving and non-judgmental, and how much more attuned um, we could be. Yes, training, yeah, in expressive arts therapy. So for me, the expressive arts is such a way of being and such a complementing, strengthening, supportive way of working in trauma work. And we could have a whole conversation on that. But yeah, bringing it back to trauma and the body. So I'm going to bring it back to the question. So I shared a little bit of my trauma-informed threads or weaving threads, a bit of the trauma treatments. So I think for me, working with the body is bottom up, working from the body, from the body as a vessel of knowledge. So your body contains so much knowledge, memories, sensation, information, and accessing that from a bottom up. And then we think about top down, one more cognitive based approaches in trauma treatments. And that's where, again, polarities, two polarities. And it's not either one or. It's not good or bad, light or dark, but how do we find a way, a common meeting space so that people can start their restorative and healing process? Yeah, Brinda, is that helpful?
Yes, very much. Thank you.
Time to go to the mute button. I see some, yeah, yes, we definitely, artists have a great role to play in trauma work, community workers as well. Getting into it soon. I feel a little bit curious about this comment. Is it Rupashli? What does it mean to you to getting into it soon? Does that mean that you're interested?
Yes, I'm interested in taking my next classes in the coming month, which is starting from 4th. And I'm very curious because I have worked with kids all this while, keeping art as a form to teach them in different ways. So, with movements and things, I'm really curious to join and know more. I have done couple of sessions, but I feel bodily involving yourself into it is uh, more meaningful and colorful is what I feel. So,
Meaningful and colorful. And Rupa, if I invited you, if it feels safe for you, enough to close your eyes, and if you were to repeat the word "getting into it soon" to yourself, do you have a felt sense of that word in your body? Where do you feel that in your body when you say to yourself, "getting into it soon"? And if you were to repeat that to it, do you have a sensation or felt sense of that in your body?
yes, actually, I'm getting goosebumps.
Good. Goosebumps. And that's a physiological, so every emotion has a physiological component, has a sensation in your body. And goosebumps, she said, I feel also I have an image. So because I also work in an expressive arts field, sometimes for me, it's difficult to leave it just at the body. So then for me, goosebumps, and then I think sparkling, and again I get an image of what excitement may need. So that's how I show you the build-up, working from the body with no symbolism, very just present moment experience of what getting into it soon, goosebumps, and then I build it up to an image of someone asked a question about metaphors. What does goosebumps mean? If goosebumps had a movement, what is sparkling? And what is bubbling? And how do you embody this metaphor that it becomes such a resource for your future, Rupa, for your hope, your sense of hope. So those are, now we're getting into other guiding principles for me, which maybe I share them quickly, Brinda, and then we step
Yes,
into.
Yes, please.
Yeah, so because I work in emergency settings and in humanitarian settings, and there's a lot to say about that, and in the movement of decolonization and oppression. But I love to ground my work in research. So where does practice and research meet? Huh? Do we know what we do works and how does it work? But there are guiding principles for me from Hopeful that we know some trauma. He calls them trauma guiding principles. But so the sense of hope in trauma work, in my approach, what I'm doing with clients and with group, does it nourish a sense of hope? So Rupa, thank you for sharing, because it was a good embodied experience of working with metaphors, with the felt sense and the body, and what it means to resource you and build your sense of hope. Connectedness.
Yeah.
So making sure, because trauma is about disconnection to oneself, our bodies, and the world around us. And Levin talks about this. So how do you, in your work, make sure that you rebuild connection to the body, to communities, in families? So connection is a big word. How do you assure a sense of safety, relative safety? Because in a lot of contexts where I work, either in the refugee camps, in different war zones, or in if we think of Palestine, so the very oppressive context in which we work, safety is not so, we can take safety for granted. So safety in the body, safety in the environment, hope, connectedness, safety, self-soothing, calming, regulating. So we did that at the beginning together, co-regulating, orient, breathe, and ground. How to bring in the work things that are grounding, calming, maybe mindful, because trauma is often about something that happened too fast, that was too impactful, too overwhelming for the nervous system to hold. So how to bring back self-soothing and calming practices in the work. And the last one we've talked about a lot as well, self-efficacy. So empowering people. So working on their resources, reconnecting them to those resources that they think they might have lost or felt they lost, which is often the case, but there's always something. So these are guiding. It's a wonderful article. After this conversation, I can share it with you as well. I've been a very guiding. So research work from some of my favorite researchers have been a great inspiration to me. Yeah. All right. I don't know why I was on this thread anymore. Can you help me, Brinda? I see her smiling. She helps me regulate because she's there, she's present. I see her smile. And so she's my safety in this conversation. So someone I trust and that I look to. And so that's in a way a good example. Yeah. Thank you, Brinda.
Yeah, well, you were talking about your guiding principles
Yeah.
that help you in your work.
Yeah.
Thank you, Katia. I'm actually going to, because I know there are a lot of questions from
Really?
the participants, and I know that, so I'm going to stop my questions and going to open it out to the others. Would that be okay?
Yeah.
Because I want to make sure that people can ask. I don't know if everybody's present, but I'm just going to read the questions that came to me.
Yeah.
And you can just choose whichever one you'd like to answer.
Yeah.
Is Anuradha here? May I ask your question? Yeah, Anuradha says, my body tenses and I stop breathing during sex, which could be a fear response, but I have no trauma memory. How do I deal with it?
Anuradha, thank you for this question. If you feel comfortable or
I'm not
safe
sure she's here,
yeah,
but okay.
yeah. It's an interesting question, and also what I want to say about this is she's here. Anu. we talked about noticing in a non-judgmental way, reconnecting to your felt sense. So already you are there. Already you're, I notice this in my body. I notice that my body is tensing. I notice that my breath is stopping. So already showing some, if you can, self-compassion for yourself, for noticing, acknowledging that in your body. And then the curiosity that comes after that. What is that? What is that about? What does it mean for me? And how would I like, how would I like to be? What is my sense of being in the context of sexual intercourse with my partner? Where would I like to be? How would I like to be breathing? And noticing that. And so for me, because it's quite a personal question, and there's no right or wrong answer, and no right or wrong questions on that. But for me, already the noticing and also remembering that sexual intercourse already is something in the sympathetic mode. The hyperarousal, your body is activating, your heart rate is going, intense sensations in your body. So what is normal and what is abnormal, and not all these things are wrong or abnormal either, so what does it mean for you, and what are the questions? So yeah, I don't know if that makes sense, Anu, to you, but we have many other questions.
Yeah.
It does actually. It makes a lot of
Okay.
sense. Yeah.
Okay, great.
I
Yeah,
want to say, Katia, I really love what you spoke about witnessing and compassion, and that compassionate curiosity to just hold it, right? Without, I think that's, and then to see what emerges, that what is the body reveal then. So I think this, the idea of really stopping to and waiting to listen without jumping into, this
what
is
is
not okay, yeah, or this is not okay, and this, therefore I should fix it. I think just kind of listening to hear, and I'm thank you for that.
And being with, yeah, yes.
Mhm.
So thank you, Anu, for bringing such a courageous question in this group,
Mhm.
in a group that you don't know. And yes, so thank you for that, Anu. So we had, you want to go through all the questions, Brinda?
Can I go through a few? Because I'm just trying to see what has not been answered,
So
to see
maybe
if there's some.
before we do that,
Okay.
as you find the question with the group, we do a little movement.
Okay.
How about who works with children in this room? Anyone who works with children? If you do, just wave your hand or put your clapping or your reaction button. Is there no one who works? Yeah, all right. So grounding and orienting for children is not always a very obvious thing. So let's do a little movement grounding. So let's rub our hands and do some popcorn. That's also grounding, reconnecting to your hands that are making contact or rubbing against each other. And maybe do you like salty or sweet popcorn? Maybe think about that, activating the sense of taste. Yeah, that's also bringing the body back in the present moment. Oh, someone's getting excited. Jasmine, popcorn, yes. Okay, caramel, sweet, salty popcorn. And then 1, 2, 3, we're going to clap. 1, 2, 3, if you want. Clapping, rhythm, breath, engaging exteroception. So the senses is also a way of grounding, playful way for children also. Okay. Yes,
Okay,
thank
so
you, Julia, for showing up. She had to go, right? Okay. Yeah, Brinda,
so I'm just going to combine two questions together. One is how deeply can verbal abuse affect body and mind, and can we overcome it with time? And I feel it's also linked to the question of, does trauma change the brain function, and how can it be reversed? So just combining those.
Yeah, they are such big questions. And can it be reversed? The question is yes. I mean, Maybe I show you a little diagram. It's the ACE study, so you can look it up. You see the pyramid? I'll explain it a little bit. The ACE study is the adverse childhood experience. So having adverse childhood experiences, if we think of neglect, abuse, sexual abuse, all these things, that's quite significant adverse childhood experiences. But indeed, this affects your neural development. So it affects your brain development. It affects your physiological being, and therefore impacts the development of your sense of self. And so these are quite big impacts on a neurological level, in the neural pathways in your brain. But what's very hopeful, sense of hope, is that these different neural pathways, they can be redirected, reconnected, and that's what is so hopeful in this work, that through co-regulation, through a safe holding space with attuned therapist, or whether it's attuned caregivers, that these changes in your brain can be reversed through repetitive practices, of course. But there is hope. That was if it could be reversed, huh? So, and what's even more valuable to know is that you have those resources in yourself. So maybe you didn't have the perfect caregivers in your life, but you have the potential to resource that in your own self as an adult, and that is extremely hopeful and valuable. So that was the question of, can we reverse that? And then the other question, did I answer both of that? I think so, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm going to ask this next question, which is from Supriya, which says, how can embodied metaphor enable the rediscovery of body as a resource, especially if it has also been the seat of trauma?
Yeah.
So how do you work with embodied metaphor?
We had a good example in this group with Rupa of an embodied metaphor. She just talked about, we started with words from a cognitive perspective, getting into it soon. And then I asked her, okay, let's get to a physical level of this. Let's get to your felt sense. What if it had a sensation or a word? Then she explained goosebumps. And then for me came an image, a metaphor of sparkling and bubbles. And then, so that's a good example of metaphors. Might not have been her metaphor, but we were co-creating, co-creators in this. So in the same way, I worked with, it happened, it emerged, Rupa, in our co-relationship. This happened. In the same way, you can, embodied metaphors are very valuable in the work. But like I said, there's no one tailor-made approach. For some people, working on the symbolism and the creativity is just too overwhelming at the beginning. So bringing it back to a physical, just the present moment experience in the body. Hey, I'm sitting here. I sense my right sitting bone, my left sitting bone. Oh, these are my hands. Oh, I'm in a space right now. I see the walls are white. So sometimes that present moment, just on a bodily level, is the entry point. For others, it's a body metaphor, so it's very diverse. But it's so rich working with the body and metaphors. It's a very rich world to go to, providing that's where your client or your groups are at. So staying within what is tolerable for one person. What is within, we didn't talk about this in Zoom, it's very clear, the window, we have little windows. Staying within that window of tolerance. What can someone tolerate what can someone take? Let's not overwhelm. So what stays safe and manageable for them? Yes. Yeah, thank you for that question, Brinda.
Thank you. I'm glad you brought up the window of tolerance, because that is something that we kind of offer to our students, and to see how do we, how does that shift from, and what do we need, and how do we notice that, put hyper and hyper regulation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and she did it. So the metaphor of the window of tolerance. So what can you? How can you expand this window?
Yeah.
And if your window can't expand, that's where it is at that moment.
Mhm.
Maybe for 6
Yeah.
months, 2 years, 1 year, maybe in 5 years, the window expanded. Maybe in between it closed. So Brinda, you really saw it embodied. That's again an embodied experience of her window that expands, closes. Yes. Thank you for that.
Yeah. I'm going to open it out to people in the room if there are questions. Yeah, because I feel like the others may have been answered.
Yeah. I see a question about metaphors from nature. Susmita, yes. Yes. Connection. Oh, this is such a rich question, but let's break it down. So loss of connection to oneself, to others, and the world around us. So reconnecting with something bigger than oneself can be extremely important in trauma work. So nature, the trees, things that are bigger than oneself, and without giving it a prescriptive metaphor, but giving a person a choice. So, for instance, very much so in my yoga work now, often I won't use the word tree anymore or roots, but letting the person, inviting you to feel the feet on the ground, your right foot, your left foot, and sometimes without prescribing a metaphor, the metaphor comes from the client. So it's a resource. It's a cultural or spiritual resource coming from them rather than me imposing that. And sometimes, that's give and take, in this work. Not being prescriptive, you do no harm, and himsa, so the philosophy of non-violence, so not being coercive in our approaches, and making sure it comes from clients. But sometimes we need to frame that. So it's very complex, but a very beautiful. Yes, metaphors from nature, trees, stones, space, the sky. Do you feel trauma can be forgotten? Mm. Yeah, Jasmine, forgotten or absolutely overcome. Is this a personal question to me or a professional question? Do you want to unmute yourself?
Hi. So the thing is that I've always heard that people have to start managing the trauma. And that was what I was wondering. Can we ever overcome it and lead a life where it just don't return again and again?
Yeah, it's a beautiful question, and if for me personally, if we look at the Greek word, so it kind of maybe feels cliche, but looking at trauma in terms of a wound that heals, and then it has a scar, and sometimes the scarring is different, and sometimes the scar bothers you, sometimes it doesn't, sometimes you're reminding it of it, sometimes it reopens. And I think so. Those are actually metaphorical ways of talking about trauma and wounds in our bodies, in our souls and mind. But what I find fascinating, and Brinda talked about that, the compassionate witness, noticing, so shifting from this scar, how I don't want it. Oh, the scar is part of me. It's part of who I am, and it's so slowly shifting perspective on, And because our bodies are so much part of 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 our experiences, and sometimes we don't remember our traumas implicitly. They happen. So traumatic memories are encoded very differently in the body. So, but the body, the physiological responses are very present, and sometimes integrating or making whole again what was broken is not a way to forget, but to restore or to feel less fragmented. So, in a way, is that I don't think you can ever forget, but maybe the remembering or the looking back is less impactful or more regulated in the body in with time. Yeah, is that I mean, that's a personal sort of sharing.
Mhm.
Yeah, as you said earlier, thank you, Jasmine, for that. um, uh, I see Rupa's question here in the chat box. Belinda, do we
Yes,
still have time?
yes, we do. We have
Yeah.
20
So let
minutes.
me make sure I understand. Yes. So
Yeah. J-
yeah, Rupa.
Hi. Hi. Yeah. I joined late. When I joined, I was able to hear that you were talking about the past and the future. For me, this is my personal question, maybe. For me, the experience of past and the fear of future is always a trauma in my present. So, even though you know the solution, this is what the solution is. Uh, but it's still very difficult for me to initiate that, or to really accept that and go along with it. So how to overcome that uh, um situation or that moment or that trauma at that moment?
Yeah. So are you referring to the inability or the difficulty or the challenge to be present in the here and now?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. That's an extremely yes. So yeah. So it's a big question, but what I would maybe invite Rupa is how about with the group? We maybe do a 10-second present moment experience in the body. Would you like us to share that with you, Rupa?
Yeah.
So maybe here as a group, inviting you, maybe if that's interesting to you, to maybe find your center. So maybe moving side to side in your body or forward and back. So Rupa or others, if your cameras are off, let's do a little bit of trauma sensitive yoga and inviting you, if useful to you, to arrive in your body, finding your center, moving side to side, forward and back. Eyes may be open or closed, that's your choice. And if you're interested to explore maybe circles, so maybe starting to move in circular ways with your upper body, you may be interested in moving in different ways, Rupa or the others. And maybe moving in circular ways, side to side and front and back for 3 more counts in your body. 3, 2, and 1. And slowly in your own time, finding your way back to center when you're ready. In your own time. Maybe opening your eyes if they were closed, and you're welcome to look around if that's useful to you. Rupa, you there?
Uh,
Yes.
yeah.
So this was an example of a present moment experience in the body, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was short. Do you have you want to say a little bit about this very short present moment experience in the body, yeah?
Yeah.
Finding.
About my goosebumps, maybe. Uh, I know about the expressive art, this thing from almost like 2, 3 years because I had worked with Anita Santanam before. And this was something that I wanted to go and join, and used to always read their things. So time was not the perfect thing for me. And suddenly this time I decided that no point, whatever happens this time, I am going to take this course, and I'm going to take it forward. So I took a small session to understand what it is, because going deep into it before understanding would be difficult. So many things which was just there in my in me, like I wanted to go all that. So when you said just feel that you're getting into that, when I felt that, and when I really thought that words into me, and when I closed my eyes, I really felt that goosebumps. So at this moment, the past experiences which was still there with me, so the reflection of that maybe.
Mm. And just to get back to the um, present moment experience, huh? So moving, maybe we can invite you to do it again with the group. So maybe moving side to side if you want to, or forward and back. So this was an example of present moment experience in the body, yeah? Not being in thoughts in the past or in the future. So that is, thank you. Yeah, I see Jasmine. She's helping me co-regulate. Huh? I'm watching her, and so it is an example how. So sometimes you can be present for 1 minute, for 2 minutes, for 5 minutes, for 1 hour, and so slowly building again this capacity for your body to be present, and that's extremely can be extremely valuable for you. And I wonder if I can read one quote that I wanted to read at the beginning, but I haven't read it. And it's a book. It's a valuable resource for me. We didn't talk about self-care and trauma work, but it's called Trauma Stewardship. And Rupa, it's again on the thread of being present. I'll just read this quickly and maybe
Okay.
we can slowly close, I think. We know that much of the harm in the world is the result of our failure to be present. If we are not present, we cannot achieve the state of integration between our felt sense and our rational mind that will allow us to be deliberate and intentional with our speech, actions, and conduct. Our lack of eternal integration often paves the way for decisions, policies, and movements that can create generations of harm. And so when this lands in my heart, it always gives me some tingling sensation here. But to bring it back to this divine feminine that Brinda talks a lot about. So for me to relate trauma work and my work with the divine feminine is that reconnection to that felt sense in the present moment. And the more you are in touch with that felt sense, that present moment, and that witness in yourself, I think is the first step to develop a more self-compassionate way of being in the world. And if I'm more self-compassionate, maybe Sangeeta and Anu and Janina are responding with more self-compassion. Is to self-compassionate beings who are working from their felt sense are meeting with this self-compassion, so generating compassion as well in between themselves and hopefully radiating this compassion and this felt sense to the greater world. So I don't know if that makes sense, because I know Brinda felt that had asked me to weave it to the divine feminine, but divine feminine is also the other side is the divine masculine, and these two forces without being binary. Yeah, it's not feminine, masculine, good, bad, light, dark, but looking at these different faces is so important. Yeah. So
Thank you.
rich.
Yeah.
Mm.
Thank you, Katia. Thank you for that. Yeah, I mean, I love what you say, that for me, it is really about being present in my felt sense in the here and now. it's really having access to how am I being, which as opposed to what am I doing and how do I do this, so I like that connection that you brought back into the here and now and into the and I also feel anyway when we work with the body we are working with matter, and we're working and matter with the voice and with a certain wisdom. So yeah, thank you for that, Katia. I'm just going to check I think there are a couple more. Okay,
Yes,
so there's
it's
Tashi.
very
I'm going to go really quickly because there are a few questions. I think Janina, do you want to start, and then Sangeeta, and then Tashi? Yeah, we have about 12 minutes, so we should be able to.
Well, I was just discerning on my own spirit, Brenda. It feels like a bigger, kind of heavy question. And so I might
Okay.
email it to you if that's okay.
Okay, sure.
Okay.
Thank you. Sangeeta, do you want
So
to?
Janina did not want to ask it anymore.
No, she said she will email it.
I think it's too much for 12 minutes. Want to honor others' questions. Thank
But
you.
it was really, we saw it in your body. Ooh, heavy. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for allowing this space.
Sangeeta, would you like to ask your question, or shall I ask Tashi? Maybe Tashi, you can start, and then Sangeeta can.
Hi, Katia.
Hello, Tashi. Nice to see you.
Yeah, you too. What you shared really resonated about how the internalized sense of disconnection really escalates into our policy making and in the system that we live in. And I was just thinking how a lot of trauma work tends to be with people who are oppressed, and it often is the people who are in positions where they are oppressing that actually have a lot of trauma that goes very unnoticed, and that they are acting from spaces of trauma and using that power in ways that are extremely harmful. And so how can we as practitioners, when we're working with trauma, also engage these people in our work more, right? Like, and do you have experience or examples of how that can be done? Because often that trauma isn't named. Yeah.
Yeah, there are different parts of your question, huh? So, yeah, it's a very fiery subject in 2020. This was certainly a very present subject. So, do you mean to say as well that I don't like to use the traumatized population that we work with, they're actually receiving treatment from the people that actually oppressed them in the first place? Was this also part of your question, or you mean in general?
I mean in terms of, I think that it's these people that we tend to see as traumatized and the ones who are oppressed, but we focus a lot of our trauma work there, but a lot of that trauma is originating from systemic relations of power, where there are people in these positions and a system that in a lot of ways generates this kind of trauma even among the powerful or the people that and how can we really work with everyone involved? Because right, if we keep working with the the people that are oppressed, there's still, the system isn't changing, because the people that are holding that together are still, their trauma isn't named, isn't called out, and isn't worked with much.
And you also add another layer of not giving voice, silencing. It's such a multi-layered question. On that part of giving voice to breaking the silence, there's a wonderful book, some of you know it, from Jody Ehrman, Trauma and Recovery. That's a great starting point to giving voice to, not silencing, giving a name to. So that's one thing, and to bring it back to oppression and systematic oppression in our governments, in our organization. I think I would like to really bring it back to the beginning when I talked about my weaving threads. So maybe as therapists, really moving away from this prescriptive treatment based approaches on working, but giving the power back. So it's not being prescriptive in a way of working. That's definitely a first step. So I'm the therapist and I'm going to solve a problem. But so that's already the power dynamics that's happening. So and this being very aware of that, and in our do no harm, in our non-violence way of working. And then there's the diversity. So making sure that in policy making in our organizations, whether it's small NGOs or in if I just look at Smart Moves or I look at other organizations, that you represent, so that in your structures, the different groups are represented and are also part of the decision-making process and that have a voice. And so being more and more diverse in our teams and in allowing accessibility is also a big part of the work that we need to be doing on oppression. I don't know if that is useful. It's such a big topic, and the work starts with you, your own self, understanding your own bias, your own avoidance strategy. With I think it's funny, I was thinking yesterday while preparing for this, how in India we're really exposed to poverty daily, on a daily basis. It's people, beggars on the street, people living on the street, and a coping strategy, or when they're in the car and they're knocking on the windows. And our common coping strategy is either to look away, to ignore, to react, not respond, to react, either aggressively, no, leave me alone, don't do this, these people that are always doing this. But there starts our inner work. You are also creating oppression in the reactions with the beggars, with the poor people on the streets. So how do you develop your non-reactive response, your compassionate response to these different, I would say, oppressed or different groups, vulnerable populations who are also humans just as much as you are. So notice work starts with you. Sometimes we think it's all out there, but it's actually also here in your body. Also, that frustration or what that does to you. Get away from me. I don't want those mothballs that you're selling me. I don't want my windows clean. No. And then that reaction that's already engaging so much physiological reactions in your body. Yeah. Does it make sense, Tashi? Do you see the connection?
Yeah, definitely. I think what you just really turned my question inwards. And yeah, and that's really important. That's an important perspective.
It's also a survival mechanism, because where do you start your work if there's so much work to be done also? Yeah.
I just wanted to kind of respond to that as well, Katia, because my teacher actually says one of the most important ways of working with this is to really come to home in our bodies, because when we are not at home in our bodies become objects. And when our body is an object to us, other bodies become objects, and in that frame of mind, you can do anything. There's nobody, you're not seeing somebody there, you're just seeing objects. And in that space, you really can do anything. So I really believe that one of the ways to shift that is really for each of us to come home to our bodies, in very real ways. And doing that work with people in power, in the judiciary, in the police forces, really like, what does it mean to inhabit your body? What does it mean to really listen to your body? because I do feel like that disconnection allows for a lot of abuse.
Yes. Yes, and that's the interconnectedness, and also they have their own stories, and the police officers, the army officers, everyone has their stories in their own bodies, and and so they're reacting from their own space in their own bodies, yeah. So it becomes such a complex reactions,
Yeah.
but the sense of finding a sense of home, I follow. I just suddenly I hear Swamiji's words in my head. Your body is like a temple, treated like a temple when you wake up in the morning, and and there's so many architects in the Indian culture also, in the knowledge of how to honor your body and to really come back to it as the seat of your home, of your space, and it's a very beautiful metaphor as well, Brinda. Body-based metaphor also. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know if Sangeeta, if you want to very quickly ask your question. Yeah, Sangeeta.
Yeah, hi. I was just curious. Actually, my son has had a accident as a child and had developed dyslexia after that, and then he has been on therapy. And I mean, it's been a long-standing, even in school and through peers, has been traumatized and has done well. Is studying abroad now, very independent. But when it comes to the psychological aspect, he still is very negative about a lot of things. He's still on counseling and therapy. Work really helped to deal with these traumas as such, or is it, I mean, deep rooted with psychotherapy?
Thank you for your question, Sangeeta. I just wanted to thank the ones, I know some of you are leaving and saying goodbye, so thank you so much for being here and taking the time out of your day to take part in this conversation. It's always very, they're so rich when people start to share from an authentic space. So thank you for that. Sangeeta, your question, what a resilient being your son. It's first of all, yeah, to honor that resilience, and that the continuation of his work that he's doing for his well-being is always gives me a lot of hope, these stories. And so is your question related to the type of support that he should be getting or receiving, or
Yeah,
is that your question?
yeah. He has come a long way, but I mean,
It's a life
still
journey. Yeah.
is working at it. So I just wanted to ask if even bodywork would help in the progress.
I mean, I'm such a, I'm a little bit biased in talking about does bodywork work because I would say coming home to your body is like Brinda explained, is such a the beginning of the work, reconnecting to your body and the body in its home, that your body as a home, your body not as an object, your body that you inhabit. So definitely, but I think offering an invitation for him, maybe he'd be, so coming from him also, that's also a little bit always the challenge, wanting something for someone, is someone reaching out, but definitely reconnecting in different ways to our homes, the home we embody, to reconnecting to our home as a nest in our bodies is always a valuable journey to take, and it takes time, and that's his choice also. Yes.
And he's an adult.
Yeah. And he's an adult, and you remain the mother, the caring
Yes,
mother.
true.
And if that wouldn't work, how would it be for you to reconnect to body work for yourself? Yeah. Sometimes yeah. Or together as mother and son, reconnecting through movement together.
Thank you.
Thank you for asking this question.
Thank you so much, Katia. I'm going to end. We've gone a little bit over time. Thank you so much for taking this time. And I know a lot of people have had to drop off, but those of you who are still here, thank you for being here and being interested in this work and keeping the conversation going. You know, I think these are important conversations, and so thank you for being present to them. Big thanks, Katia, and a big hug. Uh,
Yes, should we do a common, maybe
yeah.
if you're interested, a self hug or a hug to the group, maybe tapping your shoulders. Thank you so much for being here. Yes, thank you. Yeah. Beautiful. So enjoy your dinners. So enjoying the felt sense of dinner tonight. An invitation to do that. I miss that. All the tastes and the interview.
Soon.
So are there any remaining